In this video, I'm going to show you how to use your HoneyOptics cameras to live stream with the free software OBS. Hello, I'm Stephen Ballast. Welcome to the HoneyOptics YouTube channel. A common use for your HoneyOptics cameras is to live stream on the internet, whether that's to YouTube or Facebook or Twitch or any of the many places you can live stream to. There are many ways you can accomplish this, and in this video, I'm going to demonstrate using the free OBS software to live stream with your HoneyOptics cameras right from your computer. Any live streaming system generally has three components. First is a video system, and that could be made up of anything from a single camera to a huge multi-camera system using video switchers and graphics. But ultimately, that all gets boiled down to the single video signal that you're wanting to send out, and is sent to the second component, and that is an encoder that compresses your video to be sent out over the internet. And the third component is a streaming service to host your stream. That could be a free service like Facebook and YouTube, but there are also many paid services out there that you can use, like Vimeo or Rezi. OBS is at its core an encoder, but the fact that it's running on a computer gives us the ability to also have some of the functionality that a full-fledged video system would provide. For instance, we can bring in multiple cameras and switch between them. And then other things like overlaying graphics on our video are all really easy to do right from within OBS. For this tutorial, we're going to bring our video signal into the computer from the cameras using NDI. NDI is a standard feature included with all HoneyOptics PTZ cameras. So all we need to do to connect the cameras to the computer is have them on the same network. If you haven't watched our video about initial camera setup, you'll want to go watch that and make sure that your cameras are set up with an IP address on your network. NDI is not built into OBS by default, but the great thing about OBS being open source is that people have developed additional plugins that you can use to extend its functionality. So, after we download OBS from their website at obsproject.com, and install it, we need to then go and download and install the OBS NDI plugin. You'll find a link to that down in the description of this video. Once you have all of that installed and launch OBS, this is what you'll see. The way OBS is laid out, this big empty black box here at the top is called the canvas. And whatever you see on the canvas is what's going to be sent out to your live stream. You add content to the canvas by creating scenes, and a scene is a collection of sources. And in the sources area, here's where we actually start to bring in things like our cameras and graphics, and any other content that we want to use in OBS. And then you can switch between your content or cameras by switching scenes. Let me delete these scenes now, and I'll show you how to do this from scratch. The first thing we need to do, though, is configure NDI on our cameras. If you remember from the initial setup video, in any browser, we can enter the IP address of the camera and log in with the username and password of admin and admin. And this presents us with some menu options from the camera, and there are a couple things in here we are going to want to configure. First, under the NDI config menu, the NDI local device name is the name that will show up to identify this camera on the network. We want to be sure and give each camera a unique and identifiable name. I've called this camera Left PTZ1, and my second camera is called Center PTZ2. Once you change these settings, you need to click the Submit button. We'll wait to reboot our camera until we've made all our changes. Now let's go to the video page. Something to be aware of about these cameras is that the NDI output is actually NDI-HX. What that means is the NDI signal that is sent out on the network is compressed, which makes it much more manageable to use multiple cameras on a regular gigabit network. So the settings for first stream here affect our NDI video. The settings we're going to want to pay attention to are the resolution and frame rate. For my live stream, I'm going to select 1920 by 1080 and a frame rate of 30. And then the bit rate. Bit rate is really what's going to determine the quality of your video image. So assuming you are connected through a decent gigabit switch and your computer is decently spec'd, I'm going to max this out at 20,480, or that's roughly 20.5 megabits per second per camera feed. Click Submit, and this time I will reboot the camera. And now we're ready to go back to OBS. In OBS, first I'll create a scene called Camera 1. And then, because I've already installed the OBS NDI plugin, under Sources when I click the plus button, you'll see the option for an NDI source. Select that and give the source a name. I'll call it HoneyPTZ1. And in the dialog that appears under source name, I'll find my camera, left PTZ1. This is where the name we set up in the camera's configuration will show up. Bandwidth, we want to use the highest, so it will use the first stream settings. And then under sync, because we are using multiple cameras, we'll select network. And at the bottom, I've found that for latency mode, low actually works best and has been stable for me. Click OK, and now we have our first camera on the canvas. I'm going to repeat that real quick for my second camera, create a scene called Camera 2, add the NDI source to it, and select my second camera. Now by clicking on a scene, I can select which camera will be active on my live stream. There is also a plugin for OBS that allows you to control your cameras right from within OBS, which is a really good way to do it because you're controlling everything for your video right from within one application. Download and install the PTZ Controls Plugin. Again, there's a link to that down in the description of this video. Then, when you launch OBS again, go to the View menu, Docks, and select PTZ Controls. And I'm going to dock this here beside my canvas. And now I'll go to the gear icon in the lower left of the window and open the configuration. Click the plus button and select Visca over TCP. Then I'll double-click the name to edit it. And then on the right side, just enter the IP address of your camera. Click OK, and now when I select that camera in the list here on the left, I can control the camera. I can also move to a position, right-click on one of the presets and select Save Preset. Now when I double-click the preset, it's been saved and the camera moves to that position. So now we're ready to actually go live with our video. We've got our cameras coming into OBS, and we're also controlling them right from within OBS. So let's set up our actual live stream. And in this example, I'm going to be streaming to YouTube, but the process is very similar for just about any streaming provider you choose. You would just select that provider instead of YouTube. So in OBS, click the Settings button and first go to the Output page. And at the top, switch from Simple to Advanced. Then on the Streaming tab, these are my encoder settings that determine how the video will be encoded for sending to my destination. For encoder, if your computer has a graphics card installed that can handle encoding, it's always going to give you better performance to use that. Encoding is a very CPU demanding process, and some graphics cards have a video encoder built in that you can offload the whole encoding load to. So in my case, I'm going to select NVIDIA NVENC H.264, which will do the encoding on my graphics card. If you don't have an option like that, just use X264, and OBS will use your computer's CPU to do the encoding. Next, for rate control, for live streaming, it's usually recommended to stay with CBR for constant bitrate. And for bitrate, I'll set this to 6000 for a 6 megabit stream, which is the recommended bitrate for a 1080p stream to YouTube. The rest of these settings are fine to leave in their default state. You'd probably only adjust those if you're having a specific problem with your stream that you're trying to address. Now go to the stream page, and here's where we connect OBS to YouTube for streaming. In the service dropdown, select YouTube and click the Connect Account button, and then log into the YouTube account that you want OBS to stream to. Back in OBS, we'll click OK, and we are ready to start streaming. Just click the Start Streaming button, and enter the broadcast information for YouTube. You'll need to set the title, privacy, and whether the video is made for kids or not. And you can also add other things like description and thumbnail. Now click Create Broadcast and start streaming. And your video will go live on YouTube. So let me cover a couple more things that will help you be successful with OBS. First is the Stats window. Go to the View menu and click Stats. If you go to this window while you are streaming, it's going to give you a pretty good insight into the health of your stream. Encoding video, even just manipulating video in the canvas, is a very CPU-intensive task. And so a lot of issues that people have with OBS really boil down to trying to do more than what their computer is capable of. So a quick explanation of what some of these things mean. The frames miss due to rendering lag. If you are seeing red here with dropped frames, that means your computer isn't keeping up with processing the video on your canvas. Maybe you have too many sources in a scene or too many things it's having to scale or display. For whatever reason, your computer is not keeping up with the canvas. Skip frames due to encoding lag. If you see red here, then your computer isn't keeping up with the encoder settings. That would be back on the output page on the streaming tab. As I mentioned earlier, having a graphics card in your computer that can do NVENC encoding or similar really makes a world of difference in relieving the load on your CPU. There's a link down in the description of this video that will take you to an NVIDIA webpage that lists their graphics card's capabilities, and you can look for one that has an NVENC processor. If you see dropped frames on the network, that means that your internet connection upload speed isn't sustaining the bitrate that you're trying to push through. In general, you want your internet upload speed to be double the bitrate you're trying to stream. So in my case with a 6 megabit stream, I'd want at least 12 megabits for my upload speed on my internet connection. OBS also offers a multi-view, which is a great way to preview your cameras. Just go to the View menu and select Multi-View Windowed. And here you'll see all of your scenes, so it's a great way to control your cameras and get them all framed up before you take your shot live. You can switch between scenes just by clicking on them in the multi-view, and OBS will transition with the scene transition settings you have set here. Let's quickly talk about audio in OBS. There are two ways to get audio into your scene. The first is to add an audio source to the scene, which makes sense. So in the sources of a scene, we'll select Audio Input Capture and select an audio device on our computer. And now that audio device is part of our scene. It's important to note that this audio now will only be heard in this scene. If I change out to another scene, it goes away. But of course, if I wanted to, I could go through and add that source to every one of my scenes, but you'll see in a second there's a better way to do that. There's a second way to get audio into OBS, and that's through the settings. If you go into Settings and click on the Audio page, you'll see a listing of global audio devices. Here you can select any audio device that's on your system, and now that will show up in all your scenes, even if you haven't added it under Sources. A common way to bring audio into your computer is to use a USB audio device, and it could be getting its audio from a microphone or even an audio mixer. You'll probably want to add that here under Global Audio Devices so that it shows up in all your scenes. And then mute any other audio sources in each of your scenes that you don't want audio from. So just be aware of where your audio is coming from and if it's a global audio device or if it's a source in one of your scenes. I hope you can see that with just your HoneyOptics PTZ cameras and a computer, you can create a really powerful live streaming video system. If you haven't already, be sure and subscribe to this channel. We've got a lot more content coming to help you get the most out of your cameras. Until next time, bye.